Welcome to DIY Carbon Fiber Fenders Part 2. Alright, in the last episode you saw as we got our carbon fiber fenders finished up for the car project. We're going to move on now because we're not quite done those fenders. We still have a lot of work to do on them. They still need all the detailing put in them. So in our initial videos doing the carbon fiber infusion, I made these parts. And these are the reinforcing panels for the back side of the fenders. We also have to have provision for headlight rings, and then there's a bracket that allows the front panel to be bolted onto these particular fenders. Oh, and I haven't cut the fenders out yet, so they still have all of the sort of flash material still on them and around them. Anyway, so in this video, what we're going to do is get all of those things done so that the carbon fiber fenders are actually finished. Oh, and then one last thing that we are going to do in this particular episode is I'm going to build a post-cure oven. Right, so one of the things that you do with carbon fiber materials, or at least that you can, with the infusion resin that I'm using, it will gain strength if you have a heated post-cure cycle that you put it through. So I've grabbed some materials down at the lumber store. I'm going to put together a 6 foot by 6 foot, so that's what, 2 meter by 2 meter box in order to contain the part and insulate it, and then I'm going to apply heat to it to do the final post-cure. Okay, so first up is going to be the headlight rings. So we're getting going here with both the sealer as well as the release agent, and applying those parts and letting them dry, and then we get going loading the mold with some remnant carbon fiber pieces. I was paying particular attention to which way the fibers were laying, and having the little tracer in the fabric was really helpful, but you can see how that harness weave material conforms so nicely. So just 3 layers are going to go into each one of the headlight rings. Got 2 to make. So anyway, peel ply goes on, and then we'll put on the infusion mesh and start getting this part infused. Just a few tips here. Remember, when you're doing the bag, I'm looking for a bag that's a few centimeters larger than the total part when it's just a simple square like this. Adhere the corners first, and then work your way around, making your pleats and getting the perimeter of the bag to seal nicely. So these were some of the my first efforts on a sort of flat square surface, and hey, the theory worked out great. So totally happy with the way this stuff all turned out. For no real reason, I decided to degas this resin. You really should. It just makes for a much clearer part. The resin, look at all the air come out of it. That's kind of fun. And once you get to this stage, you're ready, pretty much ready to go. So I've got the line clamp on there, and the epoxy's ready to go. And I'll just give I'll give the entire perimeter a last surface check, and then release the epoxy into the mold. So I just turn that wing nut there and allow it to start to flow. Now you don't want to infuse it too quickly. I've cut this just for time, but you would like it to go through there reasonably slowly, just to make sure it's wetted out through all 3 of those layers. And then before it hits the catch pot, you want to be able to clamp that off. Alright, off come the materials, and out pops the part. What I did was I left a little bit more material around the edge so I could more easily get under it. And the first one I was pretty tight with all the materials to where it needed to be, and that was a mistake because it was just harder to get out of the mold than it should have been. Right, so this little wedge, look at that. So smooth, so easy, crazy nice. Alright, so in our quest to get this project done, we need to finish all parts of it while we're going. So that's going to include a mounting flange. So this is a flange that goes on the front of the fender beneath the headlight. So I didn't have the steel flanges, so all I did was cut some patterns out of medium density fiberboard, and then I didn't feel like making complete molds for them just because I didn't think it was worth the effort. There's a passenger side and a driver's side. They're not the same, and unfortunately the way that the fender is shaped, there's no way to get the part that I need without having a negative draft angle. Okay, so that means this part here, this flange is not square, right? This is not square, it's tilted in. Okay, so whatever you do with that part, if you tried to make it in a mold where you're trying to pull it out, it is not going to come out. Or it'll lock in. So I used some plumbing epoxy putty, so this stuff dries as hard as steel. It just took a few minutes for it to go off, and I did do one backwards, so good thing I had a spare in my toolbox. And I just experimented with it. So I put a bit of packing tape on the edge, I put a little coat of the release wax on that, and then I just forced it into that material, this epoxy material, to make a really quick mold. So my mold is actually going to be this. So we'll now coat that with some mold release agents and take some of the scrap carbon fiber that we have left over and just push it into here, and then put the bagging materials and everything onto the board, and then the board's purely sacrificial. I almost ran out of resin. You saw me probably panic a little bit as I was going through this. I miscalculated the number of layers. I took the material off, I weighed it. I thought I'd put 4 layers in, but when I was reviewing the video footage today, I used 5. So that was the reason why I was like, uh-oh, I may not have enough resin to have this thing actually work. Anyway, all's well that ends well. Or, you know, pop and release really nice because you use the right products. Ta-da! Oh. Nope. Just in case you were wondering, that's not going anywhere. Yeah, quick trip to the lumber store. Buy as much of the sort of cheap lumber as I can get, and get the old stapler out and oiled up and ready to go again. So now we're going to start building this frame, and as I'm doing it, I know I have no room, right? Like, I'm completely run. That's it. What I'm working in there is all I have left for floor space. So banging away, a little bit of glue and just one staple in each corner, and then working out how to get it all up here. So eventually I get this sorted out. And now we'll reinforce the corners because that'll be just a little bit flimsy, right? The way it's constructed so far. So we add some support, make sure it's nice and square because that doesn't matter at all. Anyway, so we'll get this thing all sorted out, nailed up, and ready to cover. I often wonder what my neighbors think. Like, here I am building a giant silver foiled box in my garage. I mean, I'm not a conspiracy theorist, and thank goodness for that, or they'd have me committed. Anyway, the giant box didn't actually take all that long to do. It's just foil insulation. And there you can see my wife came in to help me out, and the fenders and things are plunked on the box. Alright, well, the parts have been sitting in the oven now for almost 8 hours. So we're about 25 degrees outside, and inside the oven we are running around 50 degrees. So just so you can see the setup that I have here, I've got it's actually my old space heater for the garage before I got the noisy furnace. So that's down here, and that's kind of between the tables, and then you can see up, there's the edge of the fenders there. Alright, so all the parts turned out really well, nothing moved, nothing bad happened, and I even had enough space down the side of the car to hide the giant silver box. So now we're going to get prepped up to start cutting out all the parts. A lot of this carbon fiber has to go, so I got to mark up the headlight rings to get rid of the little flange, start cutting the sort of waste areas off, all the rest of this stuff. And you do actually need to be dressed a little bit like Darth Vader to do this. So you've got to get the respirator on, the eye protection on, and for heaven's sake, wear a long sleeve shirt. This stuff will leave you itchy like crazy. So now to get the center bits done up, cut out of the headlight rings, I'm using just some reasonably cheap Chinese made diamond wheels to cut this stuff. So they seem to work the best. So here you can see me fitting the ring up to the metal part, and then I realized I'm not using those metal buckets, I'm using these plastic ones, so I'd better fit it to the right part. Goodness me. Alright, now that I have the holes cut in the headlight rings, it's time to get the M4 fasteners inserted into those. Now, I've got a special, this is the glue-in M4 fastener, so you can see that it's got a welded-on washer that has a bunch of holes drilled in it, and that is an M4 fastener. Now, that's going to go in behind the headlight ring to hold things in place. Okay, and because the area is so tight, I've had to trim and shape that washer. So I've just bent up the back corner of it, and I've had to cut off the front of the flange so that when I fit it in, it's got lots of area to bond to. So my guess is that, you know, that much is more than enough, maybe a little bit more, to get all 8 of those fasteners in. I don't mind if I kill a little bit here. So now I need roughly 3 grams of this product. That's 1, 2, and that'll do it. It's a nice green color. Now I've got an hour and 15 minutes to use this product, so I'm not in a big rush here right now. So I can continue stirring this up and mixing it for as long as I like. All right, so if I've got any other resins anywhere else, a little bit around the edge, just scrape it in and make sure you're doing an awfully good job of getting that integrated and getting all the parts of the epoxy, like go over the bottom, right, and make sure nothing is left. Because if the hardener and the resin, if they don't get married, they don't make wonderful hard plastic. Oh yeah, fun times getting the little parts glued in now that all the holes are drilled, and each one of those little nuts just carefully adhering it to the right spot in that part. Then working my way through on the other bits and pieces. So each one of those flanges actually needs a big M8 glue-on fastener stuck in it. Okay, we're going to file this under the doing what you have to do category. Here you can see I've made a quick oven, actually. So my little space heater is down there at the far end. The epoxy was not going to harden. It was far too cold. for this material to work effectively. So if I've got the heat gun out now, surface temperature is now 37 degrees. More than enough temperature to have this epoxy kick. I was just getting tired of waiting around for it to happen forever. This is probably the hardest part of the entire job, was once I cut out that headlight area. Remember in the mold making video, the area got sanded and damaged, and I could no longer pick up the reference perfectly for where the headlight ring was supposed to attach. So in I went, the best of my abilities to estimate where that stuff is supposed to go to get it all stuck in there. So backing plates go in, little bits of sanding here and there, just to get rid of some resin that had pooled in order to get everything to fit nicely. And then they actually popped right into place, so I couldn't believe that worked. The flange worked out well, the headlight ring worked out well. I mean, you almost get some confidence in this, thinking you might know what you're doing. Anyway, a little bit of tape and then some screws, sanding and prepping the parts prior to having them all stuck down. Okay, so the parts have been drying up overnight, and now we're going to see how we did. Just as a test, actually, I should plan what I do. I usually keep the last of the mixing cups with the glue in it, right? I've just gone in and felt around the edge where there's a little bit of squish out, right? It's thoroughly dry. So now we can start taking the clamps off. And hopefully we don't hear anything move. If you hear anything move, clamp it right back up. You're too soon. Okay, so the tape is gonna release nicely. The last part to take off, of course, is the screws that I used to locate those flanges. Now, what I did was, when the epoxy wasn't fully hardened, so still in a little bit of a green state, I came out late last night, I pulled all the screws out, I gave them a quick coat of wax, and I put them back in because, of course, the epoxy is always going to leak into where you don't want it, and it'll make your screws stick. So a real nice release there. I know this one was a little bit tighter, but they're coming right out, so that's all good. Nice. There's the first fender out. It does need to be warm in order for this to work, so I had to turn the heat up in the garage to 25 degrees C overnight to make sure that this worked well. It rings like a bell now. Smooth. It's not going anywhere. So stiff. Alright, next let's see if we can get them on the car. 2.8 kilograms. Okay, fenders installed on the car. Actually, I snapped them into place, and they do require snapping into place. They fit great, really. Camera's having a hard time focusing on them, they're so nice. The driver's side fit nice. Still got some issues with gap. but that'll mostly be taken care of. The slightest touch of filler, you can just watch it close up. It's kind of funny. So it's sitting on a bit of a ridge, and it's like tunk. You sort of open it up to where you want it, and then it shuts to where you don't want it. And it's got to push a little bit in at the back corner. Again, all this bodywork stuff is for later. It's not for now. Let's get the panels built. Actually, I can now see some of the flaws that were in the mold as I trace the light down this side. So there's going to be, again, just all that's going to be needed there to fix all that up is a coat of high build primer will fill that right up. But you can see here the door gap. I know it looks outrageous, but it's actually what it needs because the way the door shuts. So this will come, you know, it comes back a hair more at the top. I'm just sort of leaning against it and shoving it hard. But mid-door here is where it gets pinchy, right? So it does require a gap that big. But I'll take those down to as small a gap as I can get. And at the bottom of the fender, I mean, I worked hard on the original fenders to get these lines nice. So I want those lines nice and crisp. I want them lining up with the rocker panel really well. I want them lining up with the edge of the door really well. Okay, so that traces all the way up the side, pretty much exactly the way I wanted it. So no complaints again for me. In the headlight fitment, like this is just sitting here, right? And they always sit like this. Just for anyone who wants to know, the Volvo headlight ring, they don't actually fit the body profile perfectly. They fit the body profile with a little gap. But that's the way it's supposed to be, so I'm not upset with that at all. Right, so you can see if I take that ring off, that's the bucket. And these are the plastic buckets made in Denmark. Right, so that fits great. So we're going to end the episode here, just with the fenders on. Everything is looking great. The fitment, I couldn't be happier. There's still lots of fitting and fettling around with them before they're perfect. So, and that's it, bodywork. We're not at bodywork yet. We're just simply making up the panels to give us a start so we can get bodywork done. But these are amazingly stiff, amazingly strong. So happy with the way they've turned out. Thanks for coming along. If you haven't subscribed, click on the subscribe button. I really appreciate it. I think the trunk lid's next, so that should be the next video. In the meantime, thanks for watching, and we'll catch you on the next episode. I'll trim all this out. No one wants to watch this. I mean, seriously.